Hello and welcome to this month's drawing tutorial. This month we're going to draw a portrait, but rather than using blending techniques, I'm going to show you how to build up tone using hatching and cross-hatching. So before you begin this exercise, get a piece of scratch paper and practice hatching and cross-hatching on it. It's not the same as scribbling. Scribbling is just going back and forth, making whatever design you want. But in hatching and cross-hatching, you build up a series of lines, and then when you want to darken a place, you go over it again in another direction, go over it again in a third direction, or a fourth direction, and so on, until you get the tone as dark as you can. You're going to use this technique when you need speed, when you want an intense look, and when you're trying to capture more of a feeling or a gesture than precision and realism. Okay? So now let's start on our portrait. For my portrait, I chose a close-up of a woman looking intensely out at the viewer. Even though I'm going to finish it with a really rough rendering technique, I don't want it to look like a mess, and I don't want it to look amateurish, so I'm still going to sketch it out fairly carefully. I'm using an H pencil so the lines are not very dark. And I start with the largest shapes as always. I'm trying to get the angle of the face right and the tilt, the largest shapes here, so that I can just see a little bit of her neck, her shoulder, and her hair. Then when I have the head down, I'm going to place some guidelines for the features. Place your eye guideline first. The eyes go in the very middle of the head unless there's a tilt. Then mark off how far away they are from each other. Eyes should be about one eye's width apart. And the nose is going to end about an eye's width down from the bottom of the eye. The nostrils line up with the inside corners, and the mouth lines up with the middle of the eye. So everything is placed in terms of the eye. Then I can start to develop those features within the guidelines just a little bit more carefully. Remember, if you don't place your guidelines carefully and then use them, you're just wasting your time drawing them at all. So create guidelines for a purpose and then use them for that purpose. And I'll erase some of those loose, sloppy lines that I don't need anymore as I go along. Okay, so let me go off camera for just a minute here, clean this up, so that I can position my hand at a better angle. It's a little awkward working around the camera. But the face is already basically done. I have everything in place and I can see that it's looking approximately right. So now I just need to take some time and fiddle around with everything until I am satisfied that everything looks good enough to move on to the shading. And what this lesson is really about is the shading technique. So that's what we're going to focus on. This is how complete your basic skeleton should be before you move forward. I know exactly where the eyes, nose, and mouth are going to go. I know the shape of the head. I know the placement of all of my largest shapes. So again, I cannot emphasize enough, even if you're doing a loose rendering technique, you still need to start with a solid foundation. Otherwise, your work is going to look like a big mess. So now I'm going to get a 4B graphite pencil and I'm going to start to use some line quality to develop tone. So I'm using the point of the pencil for all of this. And I don't want to fill all of the paper with line. I want to secure some nice contrasts. So in light areas I'm going to go with no line or just very light lines. And I can start to move into the face, coming off the hair, and just darken that edge by cross-hatching. So down in here, everything is very dark. but I want the lines to continuously flow over the face. So this technique is only going to work if you have a good sense of seeing the shadow shapes as one big piece versus separating the shadow shapes into the features that they fall on. Okay, so here's a shadow shape that goes over the hair and into the eye. I'll darken up the pupil right away to get that established. And you can still have some precise shapes, like the pupil can be exactly round, and I can still leave that highlight nice and bright. I just don't want any blending. And I have my sandpaper close at hand so that I can get back a nice sharp point on my pencil for working in the smaller areas. You don't need to be messy. I'm still going to primarily start in the eyes just like I do when I'm blending. I'm just rendering with a different approach. So I'm going to develop the darkest shapes first. For example, the nostrils. And then I'll look for the shadow shapes that run over the form and connect one feature to another. So there's one shadow shape that runs over the lips and the mouth and the bottom of the chin. I'll put them all in with strokes that go the same direction to help establish that they're all part of the same shadow shape. See? Just like so. This also goes up into the eye. It moves under the eye over here and comes down. There's just a bit of hatching over the top of the nose. And then I can go back and darken either in the same direction or cross-hatching in a new direction. Then that shape starts to develop into other parts of the face. And I can use a really light touch for delicate shadows on the cheek, for instance. By starting with the small darkest shapes, I'm giving myself more of a roadmap of where those shadow shapes fall. And then with the darks established, I give myself a little bit of direction for the rest of the features, both where they should be shaded and how light or dark they should be shaded. On the shadow side of the face over here, things are going to be a lot darker. And this shadow is going to go right into the hair and up to the top of the hair. And then I'll come back and crosshatch next to the side of the face to kind of carve out that shape a little better. So you see the process here? It's a lot of fun too. So even if you don't think that you like this style, give it a shot, because you never know. It might be something that you're really good at. And of course, once again, it really strengthens your ability to see the different shadow shapes. For really dark places, you might want to go even softer so that you don't have to keep pushing harder and harder and harder, which could damage your paper. You see here, I can go back and do some of those darkest places with a 6B pencil instead of pressing harder with a 4B. Alright, so let me do some more of this work off camera and come back to you when the piece is done. Alright, now here's the finished portrait. It's all straight lines, so even the impression of curves on the face are still made with straight lines. For lighter shadows and finer details in the face, you can use a harder pencil or one with a sharper point so that you get a finer line, and then a thicker line for rough areas like the shadows in the neck and hair. But the technique is a lot of fun, and one that I think is going to help you to strengthen your ability to see the shadow shapes that extend over an entire face, including all the features. So you want to get to the point where you no longer look at the shading on the eye, the shading on the nose, the shading on the mouth as three separate areas, but rather one big area with a shadow shape that gets stronger or weaker but extends over everything. Finding the largest shapes and learning how to put them down smoothly and evenly is going to be the key to your success in drawing and painting. So that concludes this month's drawing tutorial. Thanks so much for watching.